Oh, okay, hold on. This meeting is being live streamed.
I could record it too.
Don't use your recording. Don't use
No,
No, it just goes to the. Yeah, it just stays on the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see. Oh, I'm
Oh,
getting
yeah.
better. I'm getting better at the YouTube thing, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. I can definitely see now. What I'm not good at is turn the volume down. So I gotta turn the volume down. Stupid thing. Not that I really focus on the comments anyway, but yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
have a summer day.
Yeah. Good morning, Caleb.
Hey, Caleb. Yeah, another summer day here in 40-degree Massachusetts. Yeah, I'm telling you.
It'll get warmer.
I'm telling you.
It'll
Better
get
get warmer
warmer.
soon. Better freaking get warmer soon. Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, we'll get set up here in a second. I haven't got my bearings today. I don't know what the hell my deal is today. Can't get the blood flowing. I think I just haven't had that beer yet. That's what the problem is, you know.
Gentilly Mirror, how hard was it to hitchhike from Fenway after Cleveland?
Well, she certainly wasn't driving. I can promise you that. Yeah, someone had a little too much loudmouth soup last night.
Jeez.
You know,
I'm
I mean,
fine.
she started screaming for Albert Bell. That's how drunk she was. She's in different eras, but yeah, that was an interesting night at the old ball yard last night.
It was fun.
Oh yeah, it was a great time. It was a fabulous time. Loved it. Couldn't believe what a great time it was. Just come home to watch the Bruins ending. That was a great time too.
You had
fun. Anyway, so yeah, so it's good to. We haven't done this in a couple weeks. I don't think.
we haven't. Hi, Barbara.
Hey, it's been a few weeks since we did this.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we did a couple episodes, putting you to work.
Yep.
Even though
Good
you're
morning,
getting ready
Lisa.
Hey, Lisa, how are you? And even
Um,
though we're getting ready to you to finish school,
Yes,
still
I'm
able-
done officially Tuesday. I am done my first or second semester of grad school.
yeah, no, that's good. That's good. It was a good time. Trying to do all this stuff and balancing it off. It's good to record again that schedule again too, which is pretty sweet. We did the Pratt Street one. You probably forgot about that already. Missing those brain cells from last night. You probably forgot about that. But then the John Futch letters is really, really cool.
Yeah, we for those that haven't listened yet or know, we had Dr. Peter Carmichael from Gettysburg College and CWI, Civil War Institute, on to talk about the John Futch letters, which was a really it's a great story to tell. We're happy he came on with us, which is pretty cool. Oh, good morning, David.
Hey, David. See, no, Pete's really, really cool. He's a good laid back guy. He's good. He's a good groovy type dude talking the Civil War stuff, you know.
Yeah, his book War for the Common Soldier is very good. It's such a good book. I bought it like years ago and I left it back in Canada at my dad's place. I haven't brought it over here yet, but
yeah.
It is a really good story. He was nice and they sent us a copy, which was awesome. So we were able to read the chapter on Futch.
And I love what he wrote. Indians suck, Pete Carmichael. That was awfully nice, I thought. That was pretty good that he signed like that. I appreciate that.
I'm glad he's calling them the Indians and not the Guardians.
I know. No, seriously, it was good though, because I mean, we've said a million times, we love the to borrow from Lisa's title, The Nameless and the Faceless, which is exactly what this Civil War is. It really, really is. And when you study the letters of John and Charlie Futch, first of all, before I forget, okay, website. Take this website down. It's called Private Voices. I promise it's not porn. It just sounds it, but it's not.
He said to put in the search.
Yeah.
It was so funny. Pete said to put in the search Private Voices Civil War.
Yeah, but Private Voices, what it is, it's an absolute bounty of original Civil War soldier letters that you can read. They're all transcribed and you can read them. And it's the mundane stuff talking about, just the basic stuff. And then it has some good letters home in it, but it's a collection that Pete actually put us on. It's free. It's not like you got to sign up or anything, but definitely check out Private Voices, and you can just sit there. And I know the Lisa Sammy is the world. I'm looking at you, Lisa. We do this to Lisa all the time, right? But I'm looking at her, and this is right up her wheelhouse, because it's just those stories that were never meant to be published, but they're all on a website. So check them out. It's really, really cool.
Mentions too that he loves Civil War letters. Yeah, so definitely check out the site. Like we said, Private Voices Civil War.
You gotta say like privatevoices.com. But seriously, it just Private Voices is the name of it. You go on to it. When we were with him last week. He told us about it, and admittedly, I hadn't know it existed. And so he put us on to it before we did the episode there, and we were going through it. And his book, The War of the Common Soldier, is basically not a collection of letters, but it's kind of a summarized some of his favorite ones.
He uses the letters to tell the story of the soldiers, which is really cool. And the point of the Futch letters is to show that John Futch does not fit this kind of Southern gentleman mold. He's writing to his wife saying, I hate it here, I want to come home, and his wife is telling him the same thing. And the one thing that Dr. Carmichael talks about in the book is just kind of the propaganda that was happening, especially after Gettysburg, in the Southern media and all that. That, you have to be a gentleman, and like you have to write home and tell how, basically how awesome war is. It's like, Civil War reenactment porn.
Oh, that's what we need. That would be not triple X, it'd be 5 X's and an L at the end, if you want to be accurate about that. But there's a lot of that. You talk about the propaganda, after Gettysburg, that we talk a lot about the march back, the retreat. We say, I've said a million times, I think it's Lee's greatest moment. But that being said, you had a lot of his men with no shoes, clothes, literally falling off. Think of Hood leaving Nashville, kind of, but you had a lot of deserters, and so a lot of folks were taken off. John Futch was with one of 12 North Confederates from Carolina Confederates from the 3rd, who took off, and there was a lot of letters coming out. Jefferson Davis, the newspaper was complicit in this too. The Deserters Confession, if you look that up, it's a fictional story, but it's supposed to be real, about a Georgia soldier who deserts and goes home to Georgia, and his wife tells him, you get your ass back to your regiments. You're hurting your valor. And the soldiers read that and they rolled their eyes, because there was a big propaganda piece to keep them in camp. And so Jefferson Davis would basically attack their manhood, saying you're not a man if you don't leave camp. Robert E. Lee, signed on to this, and it was and you had the deserters leaving in droves, and you had the execution talk. But the Futch one is interesting, because for one, he did get caught crossing the James River, and he did get brought back to Montpelier in Virginia, where he was summarily executed in front of George Maryland Stewart's brigade, all watching. And it was the largest execution in the Civil War, and it was designed to send a message that you can't be deserting. And so these letters, John Futch he's a ham and egg private. He was nothing more than that. He was illiterate. He couldn't write. So he had to dictate his letters to who could write. And those letters would be sent to his wife, Martha. And if you look at his original letters, I mean, it's like the way you were talking last night, Mary. It's complete gibberish. But if you look at the letters that he was dictated to, it talked a lot about, I'm miserable. I hate it. I need to come home. I'm sick. I'm worried about my wife. I'm worried about my family. It wasn't that bravado. It wasn't that Avery, I died with my face to the enemy type thing. It was a very different type of letter. And it's tough to read, admittedly, because it wasn't the traditional type of bravado that you read a lot of the soldier letters. It was legitimately, this guy was the Civil War Bad Luck Brian. He was. After the Battle of Chancellorsville, he survives. He comes back, and someone stole all his gear.
Yeah, that was literally like how he got into the war. And we had like a question from Barbara. She asked, I can understand how John's letters were saved by the family, but how were Martha's saved? Were they with John when he was executed and then returned to the family?
It's funny. We talked about that with Peter, and he doesn't know. And he talked about a lot of the letters basically disappearing. He talked about one day, I don't know if he mentioned this in the episode or he just mentioned it offline, but someone had reached out to him and said, I have a 3rd North Carolina soldier letter. I'm going to sell it on eBay, but it mentions this guy Futch I heard you talk about. And so they bought it. So a lot of letters have disappeared. So every letter he wrote, when he was said, he was sent to a place called Castle Thunder in Richmond, which was the worst of the worst in Richmond. It was way worse than Belle Isle. Way worse than Libby. And he was put in this jail, and obviously he didn't write any letters after that at any point. But his letters, for the most part, stopped at that point, obviously. But the Martha letters are tough to find because a lot of the ones he got would have probably been destroyed. But it was very clear that the letters that they do exist, that her letters were, you need to go to talk to the manager of the Confederacy and get your ass home. It was a full Karen situation where,
Karen.
well, she was like, instead of like the deserter's confession thing we talked about, it was, you need to get a sick leave, you need to come home. And a matter of fact, the Confederate government really put the screws on family for trying to talk their husbands and sons and brothers from coming home, made that basically a crime too. So it was a big propaganda campaign to keep the soldiers in. But not to spoil the ending, but Futch does get executed, and it's a real bad situation. Two of the men, I believe there was 9 who were executed, including John Futch. 2 of them weren't killed on the first shot, and the second wave came in and just unloaded a volley on 2 guys, ripped them up, all in front of the 3rd North Carolina, as well as the entire George Stewart's regiment. And Allegheny Johnson, rather. He was there holding a Confederate flag to show solidarity.
Yeah.
And a lot of the letters from the 3rd North Carolina really talk about how it psychologically damaged a lot of the men. They couldn't believe what they saw.
That would, and you prayed them by. And I was just going to say good morning to Frank. He's from the happiest place on earth, Gettysburg.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I'm hoping it's a little warmer down there. I think they may get a lot of rain though.
Yeah. But yeah, the whole the executions is on both sides, terrible part of the war. Braxton Bragg does it a lot after the Battle of Chickamauga as a way of disciplining, to kind of keep the soldiers in line. And there's actually, it's from Claiborne's perspective in The Smoke at Dawn. And he talks about having, watching the soldiers prayed by the bodies, and Claiborne's inner monologue is kind of like, this helps nothing, at all.
Bragg was different though, because Bragg would he would have soldiers executed for discharging their muskets without permission, just randomly. So he was a hard ass.
He was. I mean, I'm studying Chickamauga a little bit more now because I'm doing one of my final projects is a library guide, which is basically telling more resources for, if you go on any library's website, you can find library guides on just about anything. So mine is about Battle of Chickamauga. I don't really get too into the in depth with it, but I've been reading some stuff and I'm just like, God, what the hell was Bragg thinking for Chickamauga? One of the books I put in the guide was it was written by Dave Powell. I think it's Dave Powell, and it leading the cavalry actually weren't that good, and they were feeding Bragg a lot of faulty information because they were getting faulty information. And that's one of the reasons why Bragg lost. It ended up, kind of the barren victory, basically, with Chickamauga. But yeah, he was executing the soldiers quite a bit.
I mean, people don't talk about Bragg. He was, he helped that tighten that army up at the beginning. I mean, they eventually, he had some significant errors to say the least, but he's a
good organizer. He just was not a people person. Tony said, what about Pickett's executions?
Well, I mean, there was executions throughout though. I mean, this is not the, this a lot of the stuff happens. The ones we talk about are Front Royal, Virginia, going back with Mosby and all that stuff. But this one was the largest as far as volume of people all getting shot at the same time. And they talked, in Peter's book, he talks about how they were all brought in. The death march on the drums as they slowed in, came in slow. They tied to the post. And it was like a cross. They had it like that. And they stood 14 feet away. That's how close the gunners were, 14 feet. Yeah. And so you had several lines. You had 10 guys, 5 with blanks, 5 with mini balls, and they would just shoot and then replace and shoot. And then there was 2 still living, agony, whatever. And a bunch of guys, they said he just came in and just unloaded on. So
that's maybe the answer to this, but Caleb asked, isn't there a story where Claiborne was able to dissuade Bragg from executing a man for false desertion? It's been so long that I read that I don't.
Yeah, that's in Simmons' book. That's in Simmons' book. He talks about that. Where Bragg was very, you kind of have to be. I mean, this is war, but he did talk people out of it. I think that situation in my mind, it would have been kind of like this Futch guy, mean, John Futch was a poor, illiterate, was not a slave owner, none of that crap. So I think in that situation, I think Claiborne knew, sometimes you got no one to hold him, no one to fold him, and he thought maybe saving this guy's life and sending a message. Don't forget too, Nathan Bedford Forrest. He had that situation where he had a guy executed, and then he had him loaded with blanks, and then they said ready, aim, fire, and shot, and the guy didn't shoot a shot. He thought he was going to die, and he released him and said, "Let this be a lesson to you. Next time it'll be real."
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of psychological stuff that happens. So
there's some comments here. Caleb for real can't stand Bragg, and Frank said, "What the hell was Bragg thinking can be applied to any part of his life?" And I think Claiborne anybody's the voice of reason when compared to Braxton Bragg, but I think he kind of Claiborne cared about his men, and Bragg at the time was about showing discipline. That actually reminds me, I did I did a tweet about my library guide, and I said how I basically give Hood the credit with the breakthrough at Chickamauga. You see it written as Longstreet, sometimes you see it written as Hood, but I think it was Hood was leading that charge. So I said, and talking a little bit about the breakthrough.
Well, that's fair.
But then I said, as much as I think Hood was the worst thing to ever happen to the Army of Tennessee, he deserves credit for Chickamauga. That's kind of his high watermark. And he, it's all downhill from there after that. But someone came back and said something like, "No, Hood gets a pass for Franklin." And I'm like, really?
Yeah. Well, you gotta be fair to history. I mean, you certainly, we talked a lot about when we talked Spring Hill with Breckinridge and Claiborne, and how Schofield was able to get by and get into Franklin. I mean, I think that frontal assault, it probably had to happen against Opdyke's guys. But the problem I have with Hood was when he doubles down and goes to Nashville, when he lost, Othel Strahl, Claiborne, all of them, John Adams, Hiram Granberry, all of them. And then even though they were beaten, they still, because the whole point was to prevent Schofield from connecting, with Thomas and Nashville. So now that he's there, why are you going to attack even a stronger army with less men? And then he got his army destroyed. And that's the problem with that. But you can't give him a pass for Franklin, because if you can't give him a pass for Franklin, you can't give him credit for Chickamauga. You can't have it both ways.
No, you can't, say basically that he was, and the guy was saying he was the only one that was able to take command. And I just I argued back. I said, well, no, there was Beauregard, but Beauregard's not friends with Jeff Davis. So he's out of the picture. And Hardee was like, F this, and was like, I'm not taking over this mess of an army. I honestly think after visiting the sites along the Atlanta campaign that we went to, I have a lot more respect for Joseph E. Johnston. I think he was a great commander. He knew how to fight Sherman, and that was why Sherman, when Hood was in command, he was like, good, someone that's actually, doesn't know how to fight me kind of thing. And he knew more of what Hood was about, whereas Johnston was kind of Johnston was good. And I think the other thing too, Cheatham gets a bad rap for Spring Hill, but if you go to Kennesaw Mountain and you see that, where his men were, Cheatham's actually not a bad general.
Yeah, I don't know if I think he gets a bad rap at Spring Hill, though. I mean, he kind of let an entire army walk right by him.
I know. Everybody made their mistakes, but I don't think Cheatham should be remembered for just that.
I think both of us are Joseph Eggleston Johnston fans, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna pick him, because he's steady Eddie. He's there at the beginning. He's right there until the end.
Yeah.
He knew how to fight Sherman for sure. But at the same time, he wasn't aggressive. He was exactly what he was. And but I think he's somebody who a lot on the southern side, I think he gets ripped a lot. And I think, I think that's unfair. I think that's unfair. Personally.
Yeah, well, this person said he was the McClellan of the South, and I was like, where does that come from? How is he the McClellan of the South?
Well, somebody who doesn't know McClellan or Johnson knows who that person is.
That the McClellan thing, geez, that whole thing. And Tony mentions Craig Simmons has a good book on Johnston. We need to read that. And Tony also mentions Pickett fleeing to Canada to avoid being hanged because of the execution stuff that went on.
I mean, I think, a lot of a lot of people who study this, they study the 1861, 1865. But if you study that immediate post-war stuff, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And that's where John Brown Gordon's book is really good. Because the book the war ends halfway through the book, and the rest of it is his politics, which he was not a very good corrupt as the friggin' day is long. He was, but it tells a lot about the military districts. It talks a lot about getting Democrats, home rule in Georgia, South Carolina, places like that. And so you don't really study a lot of that. For one, it's because it's not sexy, it's not exciting talking about elections and all that stuff. But it does paint the story afterwards of the southern states trying to get control themselves again. So they can rule themselves, and Gordon had a lot to do with that. He actually did. And then until Spanish-American War happened, they fought together again, and that helped out a lot too. But it's definitely an interesting thing to study, no question.
Yeah, David mentions, I don't think aggressive is a good trait for a Confederate Army commander. I would agree. Like, Hood was way too aggressive. Like, he's like a fucking bulldog.
Well, the whole point was you're defending your turf, right? I mean, and so I guess I understand. Don't forget too, a lot of soldiers, speaking of desertion, they GTFO'd when Lee wanted to go into Maryland. We didn't sign up for this. We were going to defend Virginia. I'm not going into friggin' Maryland to go fight these guys. The hell with this. And so that was, again, war changes. It changes over the years, and defense becomes offense, and you can see heading into that Maryland campaign, the two sides completely flipping, objectives. As now here's McClellan looking to defend Maryland, defend the South, and here comes Robert E. Lee looking to be offensive and attack the North. And but that's what happens. That's what happens.
Yeah. Oh, Frank mentions he was at Franklin last week, and he was told that if someone at Rippavilla, Carterhouse, or Carnton forgets to lock the door, the joke is that they are called Cheatham.
Well, I mean, you can see a lot of that. I mean, there's no question about that.
There's definitely jokes like you're slow like McClellan, like you.
Or like slow to come Slocum, and there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Howard even jokes about that name in his memoirs at Battle of Bentonville. He jokes around about Battle of Bentonville. Howard got to Bentonville and Slocum was there before him, and he said, "Wow, he beat me here." This is the first. Caleb said Lee was too aggressive at times as well. See the 7 Days battles, Gettysburg. David said, has anyone ever read a book on pre-war militias, both North and South? Do you know of any?
I mean, there's not specific books, but a lot of the books. We know what actually does a real good job of the pre-war militias is that Simmons book on Claiborne.
Oh, okay.
That's a good one. Because don't forget too, because it talks a lot about Harper's Ferry, and and you had after the John Brown raid, you had a lot of these local militias coming together to defend against future raids, and those were the beginnings of the Confederate Army in a lot of cases. We talk about John Wilkes Booth with the Richmond Grays, right? You had a lot of that come up, and the book talks a lot about that. It's interesting to see how it all comes together.
Yeah. Speaking of Simmons, that reminded me of Civil War Institute is coming up in June, and we actually are able to give our listeners a 15% discount if they want to go. Well, we're not giving it to them, Civil War Institute is, but if any of you are planning on attending Civil War Institute, there's like a discount code you can put in, and our code is PAR, and that will get you 15% off. But yeah, it's from June 9th to the 14th, and they have all kinds of speakers. Dr. Carmichael explained it very well in our episode, that you have the scholars, you have public historians, like from all, basically all walks of history is there. I would say it's a very inclusive event that, and it's not just focused on Gettysburg. Like, they're doing a talk on Army of Tennessee, which I so wish I could go to that, because I think, like I was saying to you yesterday when we were on our way to Boston, that because all we ever talk about is Civil War, that the Army of Tennessee is probably my favorite Confederate Army to study, because I find them so much more interesting than Army of Northern Virginia. Like, Army of Northern Virginia it's Army of Northern Virginia. I like it, but Army of Tennessee is such a fascinating study, just because of its formation, of the commanders, just the cast of characters that are out there, and just all the politics. And I understand politics is happening too in Army of Northern Virginia, but Army of Tennessee is such a fascinating study.
Well, I mean, it's ongoing. It just keeps trying to find the pieces that fit, trying to find that right combo.
Yeah.
And when obviously Bragg had his success, then he had his real bad failures. Johnston had his same, and then you had Hood, who it's kind of tough to really find real success for Hood when he took command, but he was definitely aggressive, no question about that. Even he let Howard beat him at Ezra. How about that?
Yeah.
You know,
Howard did
but
not beat him at Pickett's Mills, though.
no, but that, that was a situation where they weren't being aggressive. It was the
No,
opposite, right?
no, and that was a situation where that was one of those ones where I came away, it and Kennesaw, I came away from it with like, what the hell was Sherman thinking with these um attacks? You know, it's, I don't know, it's really like, it was just kind of opened my eyes up to that, this campaign, this Atlanta campaign is not just about getting the city. And Sherman makes a lot of mistakes on that campaign, and that's not putting him down as a military commander. But the mistakes, I don't think get talked about in his history a lot, because he doesn't mention them in his memoirs. But like to just say like, oh well, he got the city, so that means it
Well,
was a good
that's
campaign.
the old Klaus versus Germany style. One
Yeah.
one says you take territory, one says you take armies, and Sherman was a take city guy, and Lincoln kept saying, forget the cities. You need to bag the army, especially in the East here.
Mhm.
But that's again, you're talking different philosophies and different strategies. But the war goes off the wagon halfway through, when it turns into that Napoleonic type of style, where it ends up turning into trench warfare and turns
Yeah.
into in the fighting in the woods. So it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. So you had to be able to adapt and change. And
Yeah.
Sherman never really did that. He never really did. And
No,
that was his thing.
that he's not, I mean, he's a good commander, but he's not up there with Grant or Meade when it comes to especially with doing battles. Like Howard said, that was his weakness, was that he could write down a great battle plan, but then it was kind of like he couldn't read the room. Like at Ezra, if Howard had listened to him, they would have got destroyed. But Howard was like, no, I think they're gonna attack, so I have to place my men. And Howard's like, or Sherman's like, I don't think they're gonna attack, but you do you, buddy. And he's lucky he did.
Yeah, it certainly was. Howard's sitting there saying, 20 rounds each. Everybody put their sneakers on just in case. But they basically, were able to hold back S.D. Lee, and that was really, the beginning of Hood, where he was too physically unable to get on the horse and get to the battlefield, and he missed out on it. And then it began that eventually that pursuit into Tennessee, and everything went down the rails from there. But I mean, but again, it's you have to be able to adapt and change with the times, with battle by battle. And a lot of them, like we said before, like the old Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line coach Dick LeBeau never changed his game plan against Tom Brady, and he got beat every time. And he always said the same thing: we do what we do. And then Brady was like, okay, and we beat him.
Yeah. Well,
but that's how a lot of them were. Hood was like that too. We do what we do, but you have to be able to change the game plan. And that was always the thing with a lot of these guys. They were wired certain ways.
Yep. And I mean, like Chickamauga is one of these battles where when you look at the terrain, and you were there, unfortunately it was raining, but the terrain is just so like, it's so different than what you see at like Gettysburg or Antietam. But then like the breakthrough is this thing that, I mean, yes, it's a mistake I blame James Garfield, because he was the one that wrote the order. Apparently it was Garfield or someone else. It was not Rosecrans. Writes that order to move Wood. Wood is like, this is going to be a mistake, but I have to do it. And I honestly think, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I honestly think it was probably Hood going to Longstreet and saying like, dude, I think we can exploit this huge hole and finally get through. But the other thing about Chickamauga too is if you don't have Longstreet's reinforcements, Bragg is not going to win that battle.
Yeah, and if you walk the ground at Chickamauga and you see where the breakthrough was, and you see Snodgrass Hill, and you could see exactly where Thomas Wood would have created that gap.
Yep.
I mean, you don't need the greatest army ever created to win that battle, because you could walk. They open the door for you. You just got to walk.
I know
in.
The barn door is wide open, and Hood comes rolling in. Tony mentions Chancellorsville was a learning point for Howard, which is very true. Like Howard does not have a good day at Chancellorsville, but I don't think anybody would have in his position. But he still made mistakes there. Should have been listening to Von Gilsa.
No, well, it was, but again, it's a communication error from the beginning. That starts with Hooker, though.
Yep.
Hooker is allowing himself to be talked by Dan Sickles, the great Dan Sickles, Mary, Uncle Dan, that the Confederates are retreating. And you see this gigantic. We drove it from where Longstreet and where Jackson and Lee had their meeting, to the point where Howard got pantsed.
Yeah.
I mean, but when they were attacking, there were still troops in line. That's how long this thing was.
Yeah.
There's no one's going to stop that assault. Nobody.
No.
But why the command didn't reinforce that flank to be safe and at least leave Howard there holding his diaper in the rain to fight Jackson? It isn't all Howard, because I mean, if he stayed there and didn't run, we have a lot of fun with the running and all that stuff, right? But if he stays there, he gets his army destroyed. He gets his corps wrecked.
The 11th Corps would have been totally wrecked. And
it'd be 3rd Corps at Gettysburg. It's exactly what it would have been.
And that's why Sickles moves himself at Gettysburg, because he recognizes he's in the same position that Howard was in. It's not really Hazel Grove. It's more the position Howard was in. Right. And if you go to Ezra Church, you can't really see it because it's built up. You sort of can. But if you look at how Howard forms his men at Ezra, it's very similar to how he should have had them formed at Chancellorsville. And I think that's why he learned from it, because he recognized that terrain as being very much the same as what he encountered at Chancellorsville. And he realized, like, I can't have my, hanging in the air, right? And if you look at Ezra, he's in a much better position to take on that attack from
No, he was wrong place at wrong time. I mean, if obviously Jackson was going to hit the other flank because it was anchored on the river there, but that was the place. Now, again, it looked like that was going to be a case, because don't forget too, I mean, this is the 3rd time Lee split his army up here, and no one's going to expect him to do that in the face of the enemy there. So, but again, as much as Howard gets a lot of the blame for it, I mean, he's justified in a lot of it. It's not his fault that he wasn't reinforced. He was by himself, and that's unfortunate.
Wrong. I mean, anybody in that position, whether you're Reynolds, whether you're Sickles, whether you're Meade, you're going to run into the same issue with Jackson. I mean, Jackson was at his prime too at this battle. And Tony said if he'd listened to his German scouts and dug in at Chancellorsville, he might have had a chance. Maybe he wasn't also not listening to some of the stuff that von Gilsa's guys were.
Yeah, but they were going to get run over anyway. Yeah. I mean, was it 12,000 men or some crazy number like that we're going to run right through? There was.
It's one of these places like, and I finally, like, 3rd time at Chickamauga and then doing this project I'm doing for it, I'm finally I have a lot of trouble wrapping my mind around like how the battles play out. But Chickamauga, I finally it's kind of clicked, and I understand almost what's going on. Like that second day, that September 19th, their September 20th was when the breakthrough happens, but they're like attacking the Union line. I think the left is attacking the right, or other way around. Anyway, and they're just going to roll on down, and basically force the troops off that Lafayette Road. And a lot of the fighting is concentrated in the area of Alexander's Bridge Road, which is right when you're at the visitor center. You take that left down Alexander's Bridge Road, and you will find yourself at Alexander's Bridge. And that's another place we went, which was really cool, was Alexander's Bridge over the Chickamauga Creek, which I'd never seen before. And that's where Wilder is. And that I understood that part even more.
Yeah, I mean, it's you really can appreciate what Minty and Wilder did there, because it did slow them down. It did give the Union a little bit of time to reinforce and get that line set up.
Yeah.
And if Thomas Wood probably would have had a little more credibility in the army, he probably could have. It might have been a little bit different, but you're talking 8 brigades though, of Hood. That's a tough thing for anybody. But if you have a little bit of daylight, they were going to burst right through. It's like they Kool-Aid manned it right through that line, and I don't know what else they could have done, especially when Wood moved. There's no question.
No, they couldn't. And I mean, Wood knew, and all his other officers are standing around being like, "Yeah, if you do this, this is not a good thing." But you can't say anything because you've almost been court-martialed, right? Like he had gotten in trouble the day before, or earlier that day. Rosecrans had went off on him for something, and he was like, "Well, I got to do what I got to do," kind of thing, right? But it's any battlefield is best. I mean, for me anyway, maybe some people are different in this. I think you're the same as me in this. You understand it so much better when you walk the ground.
Oh yeah, of course.
You can kind of look at, it's like when we saw Ringgold Gap, we could see exactly what Claiborne was doing.
Now Ringgold's pretty cool because it made you have to mentally take out the highway you drive, because if you're driving from Chattanooga to Atlanta, you're gonna go right through Wrinkle Gap.
Yeah.
But you can see the hills. You can go and take a peek at Ringgold Station, and you can see
can
where
see
the
where
David Ireland's what they're
Banbury.
Banbury, but you can still see it for the most part. Groven, and for the most part, the town is pretty good at kind of keeping the history together. It's a pretty little place too. It has that great Georgia winery right near the corner.
Oh God, that place is amazing. The peach wine is so good. AQ has a question. She's like, how much did language barriers impact communication between Howard and his men at Chancellorsville?
I mean, a lot. I mean, there was those famous stories, the Charles Wainwright story at Gettysburg is a classic example of that.
Yeah.
Where on the first day when the Union is falling back from Herbst Woods, Wainwright gets an order to fall back to the cemetery, because everyone's hauling ass to the cemetery. But the guy who was delivering the order had a heavy German accent.
Yeah.
And so he heard cemetery and doesn't know what the hell he was saying. He turns around, sees a seminary, and goes, all right, well, that's what he must mean. He must be saying seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And he sets up those guns to stop that next wave, Perrin's guys. So because of a dialect issue, they were able to stop Perrin and help slow the Confederate roll enough time for the 11th and the 1st to get back to Cemetery Hill. So that happened a lot. But that is the one that always comes to mind about how an accent specifically changed history, and so that's always been a good one. And that's a good one. If you read Charles Wainwright's diary, speaking of diaries, he talks about that. He's like, I don't know what the hell he was saying.
I think it's quite probable that language barrier was a thing with Howard and the Germans, because Howard, I don't think, speaks German. So, I mean, there's a language barrier, especially with the accents and stuff too. So I think absolutely that probably factored in to what was happening at Chancellorsville too. Frank mentions understanding the battles is so much better after visiting the fields, but he says playing Ultimate Civil War General also helps. And Tony said, if Longstreet doesn't pause for lunch, I think the exploitation of the Union Gap could have been much stronger. Yeah, because Longstreet pauses to have lunch at one point.
Well, fellas got to eat,
He probably went to Whataburger.
Well, he's probably thinking about Antietam when those Texans were pissed because their breakfast got delayed because they attacked in the cornfield, but no, it was pretty. I forgot about Whataburger. That place is good, but it does a lot of these stories, because they are human. They tell these stories that this is the way it is. I picture the blew the whistle lunch. Everyone stops, pulls out their lunch boxes. Yep. And it does all that, but yeah, a lot of these stories are straight up like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and AQ says more focus has to be on quote unquote failure by looking at all factors. Communication challenges are significant to cause confusion or orders. Exactly, and it happens at a lot of battlefields. That's what happens at Chickamauga. You have Bragg meeting separately with his commanders the night of September 19th, I think it was, September 18th or 19th, and he gives them all a slightly different story as to what's happening. He doesn't actually talk to D.H. Hill because D.H. Hill gets lost trying to find where he's supposed to be and ends up napping in the woods for a while. And then he's found having breakfast with Claiborne the next morning. And then Polk is found sitting on a porch in a rocking chair. And Bragg's like, why haven't you started attacking it? And Polk's like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we said before, every battle on the losing side, one of three things affects them: communication, terrain, weather. It's always one of the three. In every single battle, one of the three gets you, and so that's pretty consistent all the way through. You look at speaking of Gettysburg, look at Longstreet, right?
Yeah,
where he's told he wants to delay his march around the Union left because he's waiting for Evander Law's Alabamans coming up from Guilford, up the street there, not far from the Taco Bell, and head down towards Chambersburg, right?
It's not near the Pizza
and so
Hut.
that. Oh yeah, but that's the thing though, and so because of that, and it slows everything down. There's a lot more to the Longstreet thing than just that, but there's a lot of things like that. There's Lee trying to figure out why aren't I hearing the damn guns yet? He goes to find out that Longstreet's still sitting there whittling.
Well, that's what Bragg happens. Bragg gets up at early on I think it's September 19th or 20th, and he's like, why am I not hearing fire yet? We're supposed to be attacking at dawn.
Oh, the fire on that hill. I had no fire.
Meanwhile, the attack doesn't start till like 9:30 in the morning or something like that. And
Yeah.
it's September 20th it happens, because the dawn attack happens on September 19th, which is the second day of the battle. But the other thing too, like, I mean, communication is just, I mean, even if you're on the winning side, there's still communication issues as well. I mean, you look at look at Missionary Ridge and Sherman and the map, the bad map, like he ends up not where he's supposed to be.
Oh, he's literally barking up the wrong tree. You know,
it's funny because Claiborne can see him over in Billy Goat Hill, and he's like, "What is he doing?"
Oh, you would think that Sherman, after seeing that neighborhood, would have been like, "Roll him up," you know.
Oh God, that neighborhood!
We're on the right place.
If you ever find yourself in Missionary Ridge, it is quite the place. I saw so many cars that had plastic over the windows.
Yeah, it's quite the place.
It was really something. Like, I was like, wow, this is.
But if you go to a Bragg's headquarters, it was really pretty up there.
It is. Oh, it's beautiful. And it will give you a better understanding of, like, I can't imagine going up those slope, the slope of that, like Missionary Ridge. But those guys, Thomas's guys, were the ones that they were like, "F this, we're doing it."
Well, they talk about how we wanted to set up our cannon on the lower base of the hill for Maxim. Like, no, you didn't. You just want to like drag up the friggin' hill. That's why you wanted to put on the base of the hill. Not stupid. You know, I mean, you saw me. I mean, think about the efforts it took to get those cannon up a little round top. Now picture that times 3, and that's Missionary Ridge or Kennesaw or any of them.
Yeah,
helicopter those things right in there.
The train. Good morning, Ski.
Hey, Ski.
Even texting or typing in our age of technology can cause errors in making communication perfect. If you in error send an email all in caps, you are yelling at the intended receiver.
Do you know how many times I've said the word duck because of spell check? I'm not trying to say duck, you know, but that's a good point though. But communication is a huge thing. And again, try to drive to Monterey Pass now today. That's your homework assignment over there, Frank. And try to do it without Waze. And look at a map and picture that's 1863 doing that without the roads. It's a miracle these people even got anywhere, because it's hard to get around that area. But that's the thing, is terrain. We talk about, you know, things like the Mud March and the escape from Tennessee and all this stuff we've talked about. But just going from point A to point B, the fact these guys went from Virginia to Maryland or Pennsylvania, and they actually made it, and they made it back. I mean, that's and not just the walking part of it, but just getting there. You're judging by the mountains and these old maps, you know, and these dudes like you know, the scouts, and there's that story with Monterey Pass with that girl's on the horse and she's leading the troops through and showing them where to go with the lightning and everything. But yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Caleb mentions Missionary Ridge was a huge embarrassment to the Army of Tennessee.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you're coming off Chickamauga and you have been in a good situation, and the cracker line happens, and you just get pushed back. You know, that's Thomas and all those guys. Claiborne did his best and held them at Ringgold and let them fight another day. But that's a bad day for Bragg, and that was the end of the line for him. You know?
Claiborne was rolling rocks down on them at one point from Missionary Ridge. They were starting to run out of ammo, and he's like, "Roll the rocks down."
Fight a bunch of rocks. Yeah, exactly. You fight with whatever you can.
Let's use the terrain to our advantage.
Yeah, but that's you do the old school. Get an old map. Go to the mobile station and get a map, and go find your way to Monterey Pass, or go find.
Frank says you'll end up on a restricted road. Frank says you'll end up on a restricted road.
Well, that's the thing about that, is that there's a big military station that's in a mountain that NORAD uses. So if you go to the wrong road around Monterey Pass, you're going to end up on the news, Frank. So also Camp David's not far from there.
No.
So definitely do it. In Waze blocks those out. You can't, but still, but the reality is those winding roads are just little paths cutting through. You know, so we talked about South Mountain, the Turner's Gap, the gaps. You're going to find those gaps. You're going to get through there, and they're all, by the way, they're defended. But just find. And so many times you go to South Mountain, like, how the hell do they even get here?
Oh, I know.
Because even with Waze, even when the internet's working there, it's impossible to get it. It's hard to find.
Well, look at Lookout Mountain, the windy road to
Yeah,
to go up there.
exactly.
And then there was
Yeah.
that guy in front of us with his pickup truck with all the wood that we kind of had to stay back from because the wood was not tied
Oh,
down.
I've seen too many episodes of Chips to know how that turns out. You know,
Uh, AQ mentioned she was just reading Stoneman's raid in May 1863 to Virginia. He talks about terrain turning into mud from torrential rains, slowing them, plus communication delays around Kelly's Ford.
yeah. I mean that's the thing. And when we talked about we were talking about Grierson when we had Tim Smith on.
Yeah.
And if you study Grierson's raid, you talk about some of the rivers they have to get through in the terrain going through Mississippi and into Louisiana, and it's brutal. It's just it's impossible to just try to get there. So it's really it's just a logistical things. Logistics is so huge in this war. But just getting places, it's just if you travel to some of these battlefields, not just Gettysburg or Antietam, but the obscure ones, and you go, holy shit, how the hell, Ball's Bluff,
Yeah.
Finding that place. I mean,
Or Pickett's Mills.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that was, I mean, that was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
The Pickett's Mills. Yeah, and speaking of, we had Dr. Tim Smith on our book club last week it was, or no, the week before that. And he was a great guest, like to have on to talk to us about his book. And he's funny because he said that they need to sell a Pemberton bobblehead at the Vicksburg Visitor Center.
Oh yeah, especially when Grierson was doing his thing. I mean, it's amazing to think about the fact that you have U.S. Grant's monstrous army right on your doorstep, and for 5 days he's looking that away, chasing Grierson down. And 66 out of the 68 messages he sent, to Jackson, to Johnston, over in Jackson, Mississippi, were about Grierson and not about Grant. So Grant's plan worked to a T. But it's not just the fact that Grierson actually got to Newton Station and tore up the tracks and made it, but the fact that he was able to keep the eye on him and not Grant, which is Grant's prime focus, that he was able to do that. It's a fascinating raid if you read about Grierson. It's just mind-blowing.
Oh, the book is very good. AQ mentions that the ground, just talking about Stoneman's campaign, that the ground turned to mud is not only problematic for soldiers, but horses and mules. And that made me think of, I think it was just before Battle of Perryville or Battle of Richmond, that Claiborne's guys, the horses couldn't pull the artillery anymore because it was so muddy and the terrain was just so really bad. So I think even Claiborne had to help pull the artillery. Like they had to have the men push it up the hills.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned Mud March, same deal. I mean, the wagons was sinking in. And what was great about the Mud March is the soldiers, you know what they did? They saved the wagon with all the whiskey in it first before anything else. They all ran to the whiskey. Smart men. Of
course.
Yeah. Remember Profanity Gulch?
Profanity Gulch, where the Confederates had all those signs.
Yeah, it's called soldiers used to yell swears down the gulch and echo back, and they call it Profanity Gulch. I mean, the history is awesome in some of these places.
That would be hilarious. Cool. Gentilly said it's easy to find Ox Hill just parked in the strip mall that takes up part of the battlefield next to my favorite deli.
Yeah. I don't know how the hell they get through all that traffic to get to Chantilly, but that's But you can still see pictures and get an idea of what it was like. But some of them, but some of these obscure ones. I mean, you mentioned Lookout Mountain. How the hell Ireland's 137 got up there and just found it? That little cabin we stayed at, it was like it's like Friday the 13th movie going up there. And that was paved roads.
Yeah. Oh, before I forget, we should announce that we are going to be on with the Unfiltered Historian tonight at 8:00.
Oh yeah. So Tyler and the boys, the other Darren, British Darren, will be
Darren.
They nicely asked us to go on with them, kind of the same format here. So if you're on, and you can also do MJ's trivia at the same time. You can do both. You can multitask. You don't have to miss one or the other, and jump on, and we'll hang out and deal with those stupid faces again for another hour or so.
Frank says Profanity Gulch sounds ducking awesome.
That's a true story, though. If you go, what we need to do is we need to send Ski over there to go find Profanity Gulch.
Yeah, that should be his homework. Find Profanity
Gulch.
It's
not far from where he is, so you know.
Tony mentions Johnston, I think, dropped the ball in the Vicksburg campaign. He really needed to step up and aid Pemberton.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the thing too. Is it's tough because don't forget Sherman went and attacked Jackson, so he to
Yeah.
hold him in place there too. You also had different cavalries. Notice I said cavalry. I pronounced it correctly by my New England
Wow.
accent. Some people have a problem with pronouncing
Yes.
that word, but it's hard for some people and others, by
Yeah.
the way.
It's hard for me to pronounce it.
But you had other cavalry groups trying to keep Johnston pinned in Jackson too.
Yeah.
That was the three-dimensional checkers that Grant was playing with. This is they were keeping people in place with all these feints and false raids, and Grierson was the king of it, you know.
Yeah, Ski City's Inn sounds like my kind of place.
It's right in the Mud March, right in Fredericksburg.
You can do Mud March 2023 ski.
What we need is a video of Ski yelling swears down in the valley and recording it. Screw Cleveland. Right back in here.
He's a Cleveland fan.
I know, I'm just kidding. Give me go with sports, friggin' Bruins, Jesus Christ. But that's the thing. It is cool. You can still visit a lot of these places. There's no question.
Oh yeah. That's hilarious. We definitely need to go there next time we're in the area to find it.
Oh yeah, I love Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg is a great place. I think after Gettysburg is my favorite Civil War town, right?
Yeah.
You know what's a cool little place to visit, speaking of Civil War towns, I mentioned a little while ago, was Front Royal, Virginia.
Yeah, I want to go there.
That's a cool little place. A nice little town there. It's right in the kind of middle of nowhere, but it's very pretty.
Yeah. AQ mentions mountain passages at Katoken is a challenge to navigate even today, white knuckle driving. Yeah, Lookout Mountain's kind of like that too. Like,
well, that's what I just said. The Catawba is in Maryland. Go to the Catawba Mountains and go through Fredericksburg and try to get up those mountains. It's tough to get around and do it while pulling artillery. Don't forget, for every 10,000 men, you need 30 miles of road when you factor in supplies and wagons and trying to get those mountain passes. It's mind-numbing how these guys actually pull this stuff off.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. It's like, I mean, you get an appreciation when you go visit the battlefields too, because again, you're imagining all these men like kind of lined up, and I think like Chickamauga is so well preserved. I think it's one of the best preserved battlefields out there. And I've heard Shiloh is as well. I've never been there though, and hopefully we can get there soon. But like Chickamauga is very well preserved. Unfortunately, like Missionary Ridge is not. No,
it's not. It's I mean, Chattanooga is a big city. I mean, it's not a New York City by any stretch, but it's a pretty good sized city. But Missionary Ridge is a housing development, and it's a lot of it's a tough place it's one of those places you want to go to at night, unfortunately.
No.
But you can get out there and you can drive by the monument, go real slow, and see the Pennsylvania monument with the crescent moon on it.
Yeah, that was cool.
Right next to the town tire fire. But you can go check that out. It just drives slowly,
The town tire fire.
I love Tennessee. Tennessee's great.
Town tire fire. That's a good one. God. The 73rd PA. They have a monument up on East Cemetery Hill in Gettysburg. And they have a monument in Missionary Ridge, which is pretty cool because they fought in both places. And those are guys that I think eventually are on the March to the Sea as well. Yeah,
we were over in East Cemetery Hill one day, and we were looking at the 11th Corps monuments, and it was cool. Like the 73rd, they list all the battles, and you can follow them. It's just neat because you know exactly when they got sent west and where they went, and some of these do. Like the 73rd fought a lot of the big boys.
Yeah. Oh yeah, So Frank, here's some more homework for you. Go visit the 73rd PA on East Cemetery Hill today,
and go down Queen Street and go find the George Nixon wounding monument right near my little house down there.
Yeah,
and just do me a favor if you're there and shut off my outdoor lights. I left it on. It's been on for 3 straight weeks. So hook a brother up and shut the light off.
Good morning, MJ. Jim says that Shiloh is awesome. It's in the middle of nowhere and absolutely not a victim of urban sprawl. That's really cool. Yeah, Jim lives in Murfreesboro, I think. So he's been to all these different battlefields, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's too bad. The weather wasn't kind to us. We're gonna hook up with him at Chickamauga. That just didn't work out. So we're gonna come back, Jim. We'll definitely hook up next time. We want to get to your neck of the woods.
Yeah. Well, isn't there a Whataburger in Murfreesboro?
Oh, yeah, Whataburger is the best. It is.
And Frank said, okay, I'll do it. Visit the 73rd and shut the lights off.
Thank you. Appreciate it. He's like the Motel 6 guy, but opposite. He'll shut the light off for me. But seriously though, it's there's a lot of cool stuff to there's a lot of cool stuff to see when you go to these places. But yeah, Chickamauga was neat. It really was. The Fort Oglethorpe area is really cool, and they do a good job preserving it. They really do. It reminded me a little bit of Bull Run, but bigger in a way.
It's just so different because there's no monuments to generals.
Right, and it's very Western theater versus Eastern theater, and there's definitely a we count two feel to it about the town, the people.
Well, yeah, because the whole cannon thing, like they had all the cannons set up when they opened the battlefield in 1895, and then Gettysburg was like, we need some of those.
Yeah. No, it's
Oh, Jim did not like Whataburger.
Oh my God. See, I used to live in Texas, Jim, and so Whataburger was my jam. And so I haven't been in years. And so when we were there a few weeks ago, we drove by Whataburger and we stopped and we ate there. I love Whataburger.
Yeah, it was
of course I've had it once every 20 years too. So it's but still that's good stuff right there.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe that place was just like not as good as the one in Texas and the one we went to in Kennesaw. I mean, fast food can vary.
Oh, I love it. Was good. Treated me well. That's a sure.
No, it was really good. But yeah, Chickamauga has a very Western theater feel to it. It has a very yes, definitely We Matter as well. Because I mean, it was I know, granted it was raining, but even when I've been there when it's nice out, there's never a lot of people at all.
No, that was the thing. Granted, the weather is. That's the thing is for the people who just go to Gettysburg and don't go to these other ones, you really miss out because you go to a little Round Top at sunset. There's a bunch of people there, and you go to these places. A lot of these battlefields, you're the only one. And we're not talking about this. We're not talking about Monocacy here, but like the big boys like Antietam. I never see a crowd in Antietam when I go to Antietam. There's more people at the Antietam Brewery than at the Dunker Church, which is probably not the worst thing in the world, actually. But it's still, there's not the people coming out to these. And Chickamauga was like that. I wish it stinks that that was the day we went, the day it rained.
Oh, I know.
We still went.
We couldn't get out. We couldn't go to Hood's wounding site because it was like totally flooded. We couldn't go to Lytle Monument because it was totally flooded. Couldn't do a lot of walking around, but we did get out of the car at Alexander's Bridge even though it was raining. Like we did get out and we walked around Snodgrass Hill, saw Opdyke's monument, which is pretty cool. Opdyke's Tigers.
No, there's a lot of cool stuff to go with that. But when you see some of them, they do a great job interpreting. And the visitor center at Chickamauga is really cool. That big room with all the rifles was pretty neat.
Oh yeah, the rifle collection.
Even though I have one that they don't have.
I know, that was pretty cool.
I should see if they want to buy it for $1 million.
Frank says you won't find anything like the Swole Jackson statue at Bull Run in the Western Theater.
No, you need to get that's a tough one. Even the horse is all jacked up.
Yeah, beneath their Wheaties. I think and you got to see the Claiborne statue, that's one of my favorites. Just because he's and you described it perfectly. He's standing there waiting for Hooker. Yeah,
he's still with his foot up, and unlike Gunnar K. Warren, he still has his spurs on his boot. Yep. No one stole them, and he's sitting there looking at him. And it's that very moment right before those guns go off, and he's sitting there just waiting, wait, no. Yeah, that statue was by the same guy who did the Masonic statue at Gettysburg. Yeah. Even though the Masons don't exist, they have a statue. It's kind of weird how that works, but the artwork is really pretty.
Yeah, and I noticed stupid stuff on statues. I mean, I shouldn't say stupid, but I noticed the designs on the sword this time. And then too, I noticed that Claiborne had really long, his hair must have been really long because you could see it coming out.
He had that good hockey flow going. He probably could have fit right in, He
was like a hockey player. He doesn't cut his hair during the playoffs.
That's probably what it was.
He probably was once they were up on Missionary Ridge as of September 21st, he's like, I'm not cutting my hair till this ends.
He's like, fuck Jesus, I'm not going to cut my hair.
He did what Justin Trudeau did during COVID, didn't cut his hair.
Yeah, probably couldn't get it done, Look at comments. How was Spotsylvania? I love Spotsylvania. Spotsylvania is another one. So we're doing an episode on Spotsylvania next.
We are, yeah. I think so. Our next two episodes are Spotsylvania and then Pickett's Mills. And then we are going to be having our roundtable, I think on May 17th.
I don't know. You're the boss with this
Yeah.
with the dates, so whatever you say. But no, Spotsylvania is great because it's pristine. Not U.S. Grant's proudest day, not Hancock's proudest day, admittedly. Very underrated John Brown Gordon performance there. But you can park right with they don't have much of a visitor center, but there's like a little interpretive area.
Yeah.
And you can walk right there, right across the street is where Emery Upton's march starts. And you can walk from the woods, you can come right at the mule shoe, you can come out right there, right where the Confederates would have been waiting. So it's a really pretty battlefield. It's not very big, but it's perfect. It's pristine. And it has the breastworks are real, they're spectacular. No question about that. They're fantastic. But there's not a lot around it. And it's an easy one to get to. Spotsy is a good, easy battlefield. Right when you pull in is where Sedgwick took the elephant shot there.
Yeah.
At the monument for him.
I keep calling him Elephant Man, which is so bad.
But anybody who has not been to Spotsylvania, I would highly suggest.
It is really cool.
And no stop to Spotsylvania can be had without going to the 1781 brewery.
Yes, AQ will appreciate that.
No, it's mandatory. AQ, you don't go there, you might as well just turn in your Boston card. Because I'm telling you, that's it. We're gonna have a conversation if you don't go to 1781 brewery.
Jim mentions he loves the Claiborne statue. I've talked to so many people that they love because it's so different. He's not on a horse, which is appropriate because he hated horses. And I love that it's right with the Atlanta campaign marker, because there's something funny about that Sherman would have absolutely hated that. And no, probably would have laughed.
Like, and the one thing I noticed too about the monument, right where the statue is, if you go a little right around the corner from it, it's like this in the same little area if you haven't been there, and it has a lot of markers that explain what happened, and it's very balanced.
It is
for a Southern type of victory battlefield. It talks specifically about what happens, about the whole point of it. It was easy to say it was Claiborne's best moment.
Yeah,
I would say personally, I think so. But it tells the story really, really well. But you can see that site in just a couple of minutes. But if you do go to Ringgold, don't just take off from there. You have to go into the town and go to Ringgold Station and see, and then right near the station is a little dirt road. And you go up that road, you get to like a little telephone building and it stops you. But that's where the 137th New York monument is, with David Ireland.
And nobody goes out there. And we went out there, which was really cool. And the other thing too they had the flag of Claiborne's division, also Hardee's division was flying, which is I'll see if I can move here in the picture right there, that flag in the picture. But also read the stones leading up to each flagpole, because the one with Claiborne's division has Hiram Banbury.
Yeah, it's Hiram Banbury and Daniel Groven. I mean, this is in the South, and they have spelling incorrections. It's fascinating.
Someone got those in and was like, F that, we've already blown the budget on this, we can't replace them. But Hiram Banbury.
Well, I'm looking at going, I know we had a couple of roadies on the way heading to Georgia here, Mary. But I'm pretty sure that's spelt wrong.
Yeah, it was
Banbury.
It sounds like they're Muppet names.
That's probably exactly what they are. But it's a cool area. And that's where I believe that's where Dolly Parton got married too.
Yep.
I believe she got married in Ringgold, so you can go check. There's a big mural you can drive by and you can see that. But Ringgold's really, really cool, and it's heading towards Chattanooga, Chickamauga. So that's a great area if you haven't been. I've been down to Kennesaw a few times now, but I hadn't been to Chickamauga, Chattanooga. That's a really cool area. It's a fun place. It's a fun
next place. To it and Gettysburg are my two favorite battlefields. And it was funny. I was AQ, get out the spelling police.
Well, it's carved into the rock. It's they must have looked at it. They looked at it and they said, duck,
Hiram Banbury. So we kept calling him Banbury for the rest of the trip.
Yeah. I think we mentioned it on Twitter and somebody came after us for it. What the hell are you giving us a shit for? I didn't write the damn monument.
Yeah.
It's your own people. Spell the damn name right.
Someone on Lampoon I don't get it.
That's what it was. It was on Al's site. It was on a Civil Lampoon Facebook. But the other episode we haven't talked about was Pratt Street. We haven't done that one yet. And that's a cool one too, because the anniversary it happened the day we recorded. And that's a great study too, to get in the mindset of the people of Baltimore. Yeah. To find out what was going through their heads too. And there's so much when you study the people, you learn about guys like George Kane, you find out guys like George Brown, Albert Folsby, and all the guys who participated in that. That's a great story too. It really, really is. I don't think it puts Lincoln in the best light, admittedly.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I've talked about it with a few people before, including you. The one thing I did think of after we recorded, thinking about this when I couldn't sleep one night, was did Pierre Elliott Trudeau, current Prime Minister of Canada, Justin, that's his dad. He was Prime Minister during the 70s and into the 80s as well. He had to deal with what was called the FLQ crisis, which was when the Secessionist Party, yes, we have one in Canada, they're in Quebec. They were called I think they're called the Parti Québécois, but they had like kind of this really radical side that was the FLQ, and they were doing a lot of tough shit. And I sometimes wonder if Pierre Trudeau kind of looked to the Pratt Street riots as a means for justification for having to put in the War Measures Act, which was suspension of habeas corpus, because that's what was happening in Montreal. The difference is that when Trudeau put in the War Measures Act, the name's changed, the language is kind of, I want to say a little bit softer now, not called the War Measures Act. But when he put it into place, it was all over Canada. And I've talked to relatives that lived in that period of time. I had one relative who lived in Montreal at the time, said you couldn't go out at night because the cops could just literally arrest you. We had we had no rights. And even like some relatives that still live in my hometown in Goderich were talking, I asked them about it. And they were like, no, we were even scared here because, the cops could arrest you. And I sometimes wonder if Trudeau looked to kind of what happened after the Pratt Street riots to kind of give himself something to be like, okay, well, this is what Lincoln had to do. So is this my justification for it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if there's been a lot of situations in history like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure if
the Trudeaus are big into Abraham Lincoln because they Justin has woven him into his speeches from time to time. And if you watch his dad's speech when he had to announce to the nation that he was like, okay, I'm taking away all your civil liberties, sorry guys, it sounds very much like something Abraham Lincoln would have written. But he also had the ballsy move of some reporter came up to him and said, well, are you going to suspend our civil liberties? And Trudeau was like, just watch me. Like the guy was like, how far will you go? And it was just like, just watch me. And I kind of imagine Lincoln was in that same position as well, with the how far do I need to go?
When Governor George Kane and Mayor George Brown came to the White House to go see Lincoln, and to talk about this is right after the riots, saying, you can't be sending troops through the town anymore because it's just not safe. Mm-hmm. And Lincoln says, okay, we won't do it, but we're not going to worry about it. Just don't worry about it. But he had already decided at that point, he was. And then it wasn't too long later, he's going to send the 6th Massachusetts back in to Baltimore. This is the ones who accompanied CDI&L were the 4 that got pounded on the Pratt Street riot.
Yeah.
But he sends the whole 6th Mass back in again. Benjamin Spoons Butler's now in charge. And they're going to bust heads. They're going to take control of Federal Hill. And next thing you know, Kane and Brown, they're going to be arrested. They're going to be sent to Boston here, Fort Warren, the prison here on Boston Harbor. And that's what's going to happen. So he's going to really crack down because, like we were saying in the episode, as much as he was saying Kentucky is the key, we must have it in our pocket, he couldn't lose Maryland. He couldn't because they'd be surrounded. They'd be screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking to a couple last night from Maryland and we talked about the Pratt Street bar we were at and they mentioned Pratt Street.
It's a good Pickles pub and Pratt Street Tavern right there.
Yeah.
We went there with the great Lisa and Jim Samia.
Yep. That's the truth.
That is the truth. No question about that.
God. But yeah, and if you find yourself in Baltimore, Civil War Trails has some great signs kind of detailing the history of the riots. And the riots is a really great study. Honestly, like in the Lincoln scholarship, it is one that they are almost afraid to criticize him for. But some of the, I get it, but I don't. But he was very shady about it, but I guess he had to be.
Well, that's the thing too, is, you look at it nowadays, it's almost egregious, the stuff that happened, but this was going on, and it's unprecedented in American history of what it was. And the thing about it too is that the country became unified together because of the Civil War.
Yeah.
When the war was being fought, it was just basically a loose confederation of states.
Yeah.
And so you can see why the Marylanders in Baltimore, when they saw these guys from, first the Pennsylvania guys, but then the Six Mass come through, they're seeing as their state's now being invaded by an enemy state.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Americans are coming through. It's men from Massachusetts are coming through, men from Pennsylvania coming through. So the mindset's totally different. So if you put yourself into that mindset, a lot of this stuff makes a lot more sense. But again, yeah, it was a tough spot for Lincoln because he wanted to keep it together when I don't think anyone ever considered them together to start with. And that's where a lot of the debate comes in, even today.
Yeah. AQ mentions Marylander Lee McInnes is well versed in the Pratt Street riots. I think he has an emerging Civil War book. Am I right on that, Andrea? And she also mentions that Ladd, Whitney, and Taylor are buried in Lowell.
Yeah, Luther Ladd they say he's the first casualty of the American Civil War. Luther Ladd, he's a 17-year-old guy from Lowell, he's a kid. And he's going to be walking down Pratt Street, and someone's going to be on the roof, is going to drop off a big piece of iron, and it's going to get him right in the head. He didn't make it. I
remember talking about that in the episode.
Yeah, Nicholas Biddle, he's another one. He was a black servant, whatever the hell that means, for the Massachusetts men as well. And he's going to be hit in the head, but he's going to survive. And they say he's the first casualty of the Civil War if you split it all back. But Luther Ladd was the first one. And when you read the accounts of some of the stories, he's going to drop his musket, and some of the men in Baltimore one of them's going to grab it.
Yeah.
And someone's going to show them how to load it and fire it. And it's a real ugly situation. But the other thing you can remember about the Pratt Street riot is this is not a bunch of hooligans in the crowd, drunken, post-game championship crowd.
Like Toronto's going to be if the Leafs lose.
Oh, they better lose. Oh God. But
these York, like I said to you last night, if the Maple Leafs lose, York is going to burn again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Toronto used to be called York.
But you had a lot of lawyers and merchants. You had like the creme de la creme of society. The money that the Mayor Brown raised after the riot to defend his city, he asked the town to kick in $500,000. Local merchants to kick in $500,000 because the town hadn't had it. And one of the guys who gave a lot of money was Johns Hopkins, who after the war, 1869, was 69 to 79, I've been 79. But he named the school after Johns Hopkins as a thank you for the money being used to raise money to defend Maryland from the Union. So it's funny how all these things kind of come together.
Frank mentions, when I picture the Pratt Street riots, I imagine it is Daniel Day-Lewis's character in Gangs of New York. That's exactly what we mentioned in the episode. He's it's the butcher.
Well, it's Cipriano Ferrandini, right? Yeah. The Pug Uglies in the 18th.
That's exactly who I picture as leading them is Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York, which is a great Civil War movie.
It is. But Baltimore before the war was like Gangs of New York, and the Pug Uglies were the name of the gangs. And a guy named Cipriano Ferrandini, he ran a barbershop, and he was kind of the ringmaster of the whole thing. And they came to him when Pinkerton questioned him before about the assassination attempts that were going to be happening in Baltimore. They questioned Ferrandini because everybody knew he was the head honcho. Yeah. And he goes, "We have no plans to shoot Lincoln, but I will agree that he must die."
It's like, are you trying to stir the pot, dude?
That's what he said. So, but that's kind of Ferrandini was that butcher character. He really was. That guy
sounds like a wizard. He sounds like a magician too. Ferrandini.
And the other thing too was the other thing that's cool about this with movies is George Kane. Now he's the police marshal. This is a guy who, he was a very hard Southerner as far as mentality, big secession guy. He's going to end up going to Canada, to Montreal, to be part of that Confederate underground. He's going to meet John Wilkes Booth up there. He's going to be a member of the KGC, and he's going to be in the movie National Treasure 2. That first scene, the KGC agent, that's supposed to be George Kane. So it's not him. It's someone like him. But that's kind of what he was supposed to be, was that George Kane character. So a lot of these people are in these, but it's a cool study though. But the Luther Ladd story, I knew he was buried in Lowell.
So now we got an excuse to go to Lowell.
Lowell's also
maybe we can meet AQ up there and go.
Butler's buried up there, and Adele Bart Ames is buried up there. They're right next to each other. So there's definitely some things to do in Lowell. Lowell's a sneaky good brewery town too.
Oh, okay. We should go up there sometime.
It's not bad. It's not too bad.
David mentions Bill the Butcher, Amsterdam Vallon, Pug Uglies, Dead Rabbits. What a great film. Like, I love Gangs of New York. It is such a good, I think I saw it like 3 times in the theater. I mean, admittedly, Leonardo DiCaprio is one of my favorite actors. But I love Daniel Day-Lewis. I love what's her face, the chick that's in it. She's really good too. And Elliot from E.T. was in it.
Yeah, he's also in all those Haunted Hill movies, TV shows we
Yeah,
watch.
yeah. And I don't know, he like there's one part in the movie where Bill throws the knife at Abraham Lincoln and it gets him right. And it's the same eye that the bullet lodged
Yeah.
behind. 10 years later, he's playing Lincoln in a film. Like I find, and I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is a great actor too.
No, he is. He is.
Plays
But
those roles so well.
definitely the best Lincoln. I mean, there's been a few of them that have come
Yeah.
out.
I personally, I mean, he is the best Lincoln. I personally like Billy Campbell in Killing Lincoln. I thought he was really,
Yeah.
really good.
He's okay, but I thought that Daniel Day-Lewis captured the Lincoln sly personality and sense of humor a little bit better. I know that some movie makers put it in there, but I think Billy Campbell was Lincoln because he looks like Lincoln.
He's
I think
tall. He's the
right,
exact same height.
but I
as
think
well.
I think Daniel Day-Lewis looked like Lincoln, but he also knew how to act like Lincoln.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
that's why I think that some of those scenes in the movie Lincoln are actually really, really cool.
Yeah. My mom, she watched it a few times, and she was like me. She would watch it kind of just, it was something she could put on. But she said every time she watched it, she saw something new. And she also loved Tommy Lee Jones. So she loved that he was in it. But she said, like, I feel like I'm watching Abraham Lincoln. You know, that's what she said. She just like loved the movie so much. Yeah, David said Day-Lewis becomes his characters. Yeah, it was, he definitely does. And I saw Lincoln in the theater. But yeah, Gangs of New York was like 3 times. I was just like, wow, that movie totally, I don't know. And every time I watch it, I find something different. And you and I were talking about this, is not Civil War related, but the movie The Patriot. How much we love the movie The Patriot, and people shit all over it. It's a good
Well,
movie.
it's not the most historically accurate
It's
movie
not
in the world.
historically accurate, but it's good.
I mean, it's a good movie though. I mean, people like Star Wars. I don't think that's a true story either. I don't know,
No,
maybe.
and I mean, I'm wanting to watch The Patriot again because I'm getting into I'm reading a book about the American Revolution, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the cast of characters, like Paul Revere and Joseph Warren, and I'm finding out George Washington was kind of a dick.
We drag you over to Battle Road. Next thing you think you're Molly Pitch now. It's pretty cool, but it's that was a good day going over there. But yeah, George Washington, he was he did his job.
Oh, he did it very well, but I don't
job.
know if he was a really nice person. That actually just thought of something, speaking of like Canada and all that too. I wanted to mention that there is a new book out about Canada's role in the Civil War. It's written by Julian Scheer, and I think it's called The North Star. I've read one of his books before, and he is an amazing author. Like, he tells the story like you're kind of like Alexander Rose, that kind of narrative that you get pulled in and you're like, wait, is this actually like real? Is this happening? But I think like it's definitely worth checking out, The North Star by Julian Scheer. And it's kind of, and it mentions of all people, it mentions Doherty, who is one of the guys that found Booth. But what I'm looking forward to is reading about Montreal and its role in the Civil War, because
yeah, well, we'll definitely. I think that'll be a future book club eventually at some point. But no, Edward Doherty, Canadian, he's going the tough grave to find, by the way, over at Arlington.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I'm just going to put the title of the book in here. I'm not sure if I'm spelling his name right, but anyway, that's it there. David said, fun story. I saw Lincoln in Atlanta because I was there for a work conference. That was interesting.
I can only imagine.
Oh God.
I was stared and cheered at the end,
Jeez. You know who was good in Killing Lincoln though, besides Billy Campbell, was the kid that played Booth.
Oh, that was the guy
Jesse,
the son of the dude from Miami Vice, Jesse Johnson.
Yeah. He was really good. That whole documentary is not connected to Bill
O'Reilly.
It's not. He's an executive producer, but I remember talking to Dave Taylor about it one time, and Dave Taylor was one of the ones that was consulted for the documentary, and he said it's not connected to the book at all.
No, it tells the story pretty well. I mean, it's interesting, that the documentary, I'm sure you've seen it, Tom Hanks does it, but they bring in some of these lesser characters, guys like James Tanner, the stenographer, who no one knows about, and they say his pencil broke when he died, and that's why you don't know if it says Lincoln. Now he belongs to the Ages or Angels,
Yeah,
because the pencil broke and he couldn't finish the word. it wasn't by memory, but it brings out a lot of characters like that. It didn't put Mary Surratt in it at all, which I thought was kind of weird.
No, I thought that was really weird. And I watched it with a few people that, and they're like, where's Mary Surratt? And I'm like, no, she's not in it. I'll just put, Jim mentioned that he got a review copy of the North Star, so he's going to read it.
Oh, definitely.
That's very cool.
So, it's, but that it's a really good documentary, but there are definitely some things on it. Like you wonder how they focus on some of the really low level characters, but they leave out some of the big ones. But that's what's kind of cool about it, because I guess they assume that people know who Mary Surratt is, for example, or Dr. Mudd is, who's also not in it. But it's I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all that stuff.
No, I recommend it to so many people to watch because it's such a well done documentary. It's great if you're just getting in to the assassination as well. Like it and James Swanson's books are great to read for that. And like definitely recommend that. Like his books are great.
Yeah, but there's a whole bunch of good documentaries. I mean, books about the Lincoln assassination.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, American Brutus, I still think is the king.
Yeah.
But Weichman's diary is interesting too. There's a lot of fabrication in it, but again, it does tell the story in real time, so it's definitely worth the read. Whether you like Weichman or you don't like Weichman, it's definitely worth reading it. Even Eisenschimmel's book is a fun read.
Yeah, well, they're all. I mean, you have to read a whole bunch of stuff to understand what's going on. Like I just finished another biography about Mary Surratt, and it is called Hanged. It just came out. And it was written for more like the young adult audience. So you're thinking like teenagers basically, but it tells the story so well about her, and it uses Weichman a lot, but she's got a different point of view than Dr. Kate Clifford Larson. I can tell that this woman who wrote this book, she really liked Mary and felt bad for her that she was hung.
No, because I mean, obviously, when you talk about Mary Surratt, there's that gray area, what she knew, what she didn't know.
Yeah.
And Dr. Kate, who, admittedly, I was surprised that she was very much on the anti-Mary Surratt side, but she's going on the basis of she had to have known, because how could she have? But then you've also got the other side that says a lot of the stuff that was put in that trial, was people trying to save their own asses.
Yeah, well, John Lloyd admitted that.
Well, John Lloyd was a king of it. This is a guy who was hammered drunk. I mean, a full call me maybe situation when these guys arrived, and he couldn't remember anything. And did they tell you that that they'd be coming for the guns? Oh yeah, that's what they said.
And then he was like, actually, no, they didn't. And
and he's like, and then when they threatened him with going to the Capitol prison, his memory got a lot better, but they started telling him things he wanted to hear. So a lot of it is hearsay. If it was in today's trial, that would have been laughed out of court. But back then, it was a little bit different, especially in a military trial. But it depends on where you fall on it. I mean, I'm in the middle. I don't think she's innocent, but I don't think she's guilty.
I'm that way too. I don't think she deserved to hang. Like I thought I was like, geez. And the thing about this Hanged book, Jim mentions it's on his list to read. It is like one of these books where I was reading it and she tells the story so well, especially at the end, where you're like, oh my God, is she going to get the stay of execution? Like you're kind of on the edge of your seat. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook is only 10 hours long. And it's, I think it's on Audible. I checked it out from Plymouth Public Library, because libraries are another place where you can find audiobooks. That's where I got my American Revolutionary War book from too. AQ mentions The Lincoln Murder Conspiracy by William Hanchett is a great book too. Jim says from that Killing Lincoln documentary, he loves the part when Lincoln crawls into bed with Seward when they're talking. And then Gentili said Kevin Conway captured Buster Cone's personality.
Well, he did. I mean, obviously Connolly probably should have got an Oscar for that. He probably should have.
There was someone on Twitter the other day that I think thought Buster was real, and someone had to politely.
Oh, do you know how many times I've been a little round top and someone asked me, where Buster Crane was? Is there a wounding site monument or things like where he's buried and stuff like that? I'm telling you,
Gettysburg.
John has to do that Buster tour, the real
Colonel Darwin tour,
the Colonel Darwin tour, because people take that. You said that time we were made that time. The guy said he saw the movie, right?
Yeah. That guy. When I mentioned Slocum and he had no idea, he's like, I saw the movie. I'm like, Okay.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. The movie's great. Everyone loves the movie Gettysburg, but you have to understand it's a movie, kind of like the Mary Surratt movie
Yep.
with Robin Wright that we talk about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things put in there because otherwise it's a court document.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
You know?
Tony mentions that Mary's son John got off way too easy.
Well, that's the thing too, is he had the benefit of not being around. He was gone.
Yeah.
And then when he finally hit, if you want to read a good story, read about his capture. Because he goes he goes from Canada, ends up going over to the Vatican. He becomes one of the papal guard. And someone recognizes him because he went to school, a Catholic school with him in Maryland, because Mary Surratt put John in a Catholic school when he was young. And ironically, because he couldn't get into college in Boston, how history might have changed if somebody in the admissions department of one of these schools let him in. He gets caught, and he goes on the run, and he ends up in Malta. And because of a pandemic, he gets stuck there and has to wait, and that they ultimately catch him.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes back here, and they find him not guilty, or not. It was a hung jury because on the same evidence. And next thing you know, he starts doing speaking tours about it. And the feds threaten him. They go, you know something, we're going to retry you again. You're going to keep making money off this. One of the speaking tours that he gave was in New York City at Cooper Union on the same podium that Lincoln did a speech on. Talk about the assassination, kidnapping of Lincoln. And then he finally stopped. So his John Surratt story is an interesting one. It really, really is.
Yeah, and Jim mentions The Madman and the Assassin, The Strange Life of Boston Corbett and the Man Who Killed John Wilkes Booth by Scott Martell is an absolutely fascinating read.
I mean, there's crazy and there's castrate yourself crazy. And
it's Boston Corbett.
Boston crazy, Boston Corbett. But he shot him. He did. Lincoln's Avengers. This is the 16th New York.
Yep. I don't know if Doherty was too happy he did that, but.
Well, I think they wanted to catch him alive. They wanted to, because I think they wanted to find out if there was anybody else a part of it. And that's why there's always those conspiracy theories was, if you read Eisenschimmel's book, I mentioned before, that the book is, it's basically fiction, but it tries to tie Stanton into it, tries to bring in the Catholic Church into it. But again, it's, read anything and make up your own mind. But it's, I think it's kind of stupid, the book by itself, but people do read it. It is one of them. So, I
mean, it's one of the, you can get Dave Taylor going on the conspiracy theories.
What we were talking about, we were talking to Dave that last time, we were talking about the Enid, Oklahoma story and trying to add some credence to the Bates book. The grandfather of the actress, Kathy Lee Bates, wrote a book stating that Booth survived Garrett's farm. It was a body double, and he lived to be a much older guy. He commits suicide in Enid, Oklahoma, and then his body gets traveled around part of a circus. Come see John Wilkes Booth's body.
That's creepy.
But again, it's obviously not. I mean, I think any reasonable person accepts the fact that Booth was killed. But of course, there's the missing picture on the monitor.
Well, that went with Stanton because screw Stanton. I cannot that is a guy I cannot stand. I do not like Stanton at all.
No, Stanton was he was the character in that movie Dave, the guy who was pulling the strings behind the presidents. The Langella character. That's who he was. And people think he had something to do with it, his hands. I don't think so. No. He was very emotional over there at the Peterson house when Lincoln was going up the spout there. So again, but it's a fun story. It's something to think of, talk about at the bars like we're doing right now. So
it is a great, the Lincoln assassination is very fascinating. It's what got me into the whole Civil War. The other thing that Hanged talks about is just how Lewis Powell Payne, just before they hang him.
You're trying to bring Dave Powell into this.
You know how many books he's written about Chickamauga?
Yeah, he's like the guru.
I didn't realize it until I put them all in my library guide. I'm like,
him and Lee, was it Malchow? Is that who it is?
Pardon?
Who's the other one?
Lee Makowski, Lee McInnes. I can't remember.
Yeah, but
Lee White.
Lee White. I'm sorry, Lee White. He does a lot of that too. But there's who the hell knows? I mean, it's interesting to see, but Stanton is a classic villain in the American Civil War. And the problem with him is because he gets impeached, it leads to he gets kicked out of office, it leads to the leads to the Andrew Johnson impeachment. But he dies young. because he wants to be a Supreme Court justice. I think he died 1870,
Yeah.
right around there.
Yeah.
And his story had not been told. So that's why there's always these conspiracy theories about Stanton. He was a dick. He was. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's going up against Lincoln like that. He disagreed with Lincoln in a lot of ways. I don't think he's going to get involved in a plot to assassinate the guy for
because Booth decided to do that a few days before.
Because Stanton was no fan of Johnson either. No. So what's he going to do with Johnson? I don't know. But that's fun to talk about, though.
It's very interesting. David said Stanton is Beelzebub. AQ mentions Lucy Hambert Hale, romantic involvement is interesting too. Family home is in New Hampshire and open to visitors. Chantilly mentions Buster Tours booked privately and leaves from the mine at 1 a.m. if the tour guide can still walk. Frank says, I just booked the tour.
Frank, you better get your hindquarters over to the mine while you're there tonight.
We're sending Frank on so many missions today.
Frank is going to be our messenger. You're going to go find Frazanito and buy him a Coors Light, and I guarantee you, before you know it, you'll buy a book.
Yep. Who did that happen to? Was that
the Gentili happened to? Happened to us too. Do you have my book? Let me show it to you. And then he signs it, and you're going to buy it. I mean, it's a brilliant marketing plan.
It is. He's such a good dude to talk to.
Oh, he is. And I know he was part of the Adams County Museum open up, and he was doing something there with Gary, and who else was over there?
Sue Boardman.
Sue Boardman was there with them. But that's I'm looking forward to seeing the museum. That just opened. We haven't been there yet, so that'll be a good visit.
Jim mentions he loves the scene in Lincoln when Stanton can't absolutely stand to listen to another Lincoln stories. That is funny. He's like, I don't want to hear another story.
Well, that's the Ethan Allen story. That story is true. If you go up to Burlington, Vermont, where we're going to be going not too long, go see Howard's grave. You go see the Green Mountain Boys, Ethan Allen. They'll tell you that story about the whole thing with the.
Why we have a picture of George Washington in the washroom.
We have a picture. We have a George Washington picture right in the bathroom for the same reason, because the Lincoln movie. So we have that because of the movie. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, but David said, no, I cannot hear any more stories, and he walks away.
I mean, I don't know if that scene was real, that Battle of Wilmington, that the time, but it was a good story to throw in, because he did tell a lot of those. He was like that guy in the subway. Hi, how are you? I'll tell you how I am. Oh shit! Then you got to listen for a half an hour.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me. You know who it reminded me? Like having Tim Smith on and Kent Masterson Brown reminded me of that. Like they had some great stories. Like Tim Smith just was like, you can tell how much he loves Grierson's Raid.
Oh, that was a good conversation. He was the one book club guy we had on when we said, okay, it's time to settle down. He was like, oh, really? Okay. He was like disappointed. He was, but it's like we try to commit to these guys for just an hour and take all their time, but we try to be respectful of their time. But you could tell now, Kent Masterson Brown, the thing about him, he's like talking to your grandfather who fought in the war. Like you sit there and talk to him, and you got to catch yourself and go, wait a second, this guy wasn't really there. This is just him talking about, but he tells these first person stories. And that's what's great about it, is they bring you in, they enthrall you to it. And then that's how those guys are. And a lot of the people are. When we were talking to Pete Carmichael, same deal.
Oh, he's a great storyteller, knows so much stuff.
Yeah, and you just listen to these guys talk all day,
Yeah, and they're all very down to earth. I remember like somebody asked Tim a question, his eyes just lit up. He's like, oh yes, I can talk about this now. You know? Like it's great to see. And that's why I'm looking forward to having Simmons on. Because I think he's going to be a great guest, because this is a Navy historian who has written about Pat Claiborne and Joseph E. Johnston. We're going to be talking about his book about Claiborne, but I'm really looking forward to that one as well.
Well, his Claiborne book, first of all, is fantastic. It just is. And so if you're gonna hopefully you read the books for these book clubs, or even though we suggest them, we book enable. You're the queen of the book enablers. Remember those days, But that book is great, because you'll learn not just about Claiborne, you'll learn about people like Thomas Hinman, people like that. And
wasn't Hinman the party man?
He was kind of like the friend you go out with, and your mother says, "Oh shit, he's going with you." That's who Thomas Hinman was. I mean, they got that alley, that fight, and guns were pulled and people got shot.
Oh yeah, Claiborne got shot in the lung.
Yep. But he was that guy. He was the bad influence guy, and he ended up fighting, obviously, throughout the war in the Confederacy. But you learn about people like that, and like I mentioned before, you learn a lot about the pre-war militia stuff, a lot of Clayburne, who never forgave Joseph Johnston for giving up Harper's Ferry so early in the
Wow,
war,
I forgot that part of the
you
book.
know. And so it's neat because you get a lot of that pre-war injury. That's why someone mentioned about the militia. That I don't know if any books that specifically talks about that, but that book talks a lot about it. It's probably going to give you a good flavor for what it was. But yeah, that's pretty cool, you know.
Well, he presents Clayburne in a very human light as well. He's not just talking about the military, about the tactics. He's talking about Clayburne, the person, as well, because he weaves Sue Tarleton into the story. Now, she's only in it at the very end because unfortunately they meet like maybe a year and a bit before he dies at Franklin. But, you know, and his conclusion of the book is very good. Like he talks about like how Clayburne was passionate about everything he did in life, whether it was the army, whether it was his love for Sue, all this stuff. And I think the other thing too, that he doesn't say this, I don't think in the book, but the other thing too, is that Clayburne was always searching for his home, and he finally found it in Arkansas. And it's a very human portrayal of him, that there's Clayburne, the military guy, and Clayburne, like the awkward human that didn't want to go to parties with Hardee, right?
No, I think Clayburne's whole story is he just wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
He just wanted to find a home where he could be respected. And MJ, we'll talk to you later. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thank you, MJ. And to Ski and Gentili, because they're jumping off too. Okay, Roger.
We're gonna jump up here in a few minutes anyway. Yeah. MJ didn't say a word about the Red Sox because her Yankees got smoked by Texas last night. So thank you, Texas.
But yeah, you were saying about the Clayburne book.
No, the Clayburne book is great because it tells the whole story. And if he's a guy who, again, he's in Ohio, he's trying to get into pharmacy school, he can't get in, finally gets a job in Helena, Arkansas, where he can be a pharmacist, because what he wanted to do apparently is like the guy wants to be the dentist, the Rudolph thing, apparently that's what he wants to be, a pharmacist. But because of that, when the war starts, he finds a home in Helena. He becomes a Freemason. He climbs very quickly in the ranks of the Freemason, if they existed. Yeah. And he ends up staying in the South. And when the war starts, ends up being, and I think both of our opinions, the best the Confederates had on the general side. And so it just goes to show how things might have been different. So you talk about John Surratt not getting into the school in Boston. How about Pat Clayburne not getting into the Ohio Pharmacy School? How history might have changed on both
fronts. Or if
fronts.
He'd stayed in Cincinnati. Could
you imagine Grant fighting with Sherman in one wing and Clayburne on the other?
Jeez.
Seriously.
I honestly think, and we've talked about this before on here, I think that when Sherman had his little like crazy situation, I don't think it was 1862, I think if Clayburne had stayed in the North, I think he probably would have been put in charge of that army, and things might have been really different. Like, could you imagine Clayburne at like, it changes the whole ball game, you know, like completely.
What do you mean if Clayburne at Chickamauga? What do you mean?
Like if he's like fighting at Chickamauga for the North.
Oh, for the North, you mean? I was going to say, I thought this was what if Meade was at Gettysburg? I thought it was one of those situations you were going on the wrong trail here.
No, for the North.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it would, but who knows? I mean, who the hell knows how things might have been different? But I think he would have been a arrow out of the quiver of the Confederacy for the North. So it would have hurt the Confederacy anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know if he would have found himself on Franklin on the other side. Who the hell knows?
I don't think he would have. He probably would have been on the March to the Sea.
It's certainly possible. That's kind of where he was. So, but he's a good read. So when we have Simmons on, Craig Simmons, I'm sure, because he was very excited to hear that we were going to bring him on to talk about the book, because that was pretty cool. Yeah,
Frank's like, are we doing Civil War fantasy booking? I'm all for it. Yeah, we do the what if game. You learn a lot doing the what if game, and Clayburne's one of those big what ifs. Like, what if he fought for the North? Like, how does that change command structure in the Western theater? You know, does he end up taking over that army that Sherman has to leave temporarily because of the insanity thing? And how does that change everything? You know, because you have a guy who is, I mean, presumably Clayburne would have been just as good fighting for the North as he was for the South, you know?
No, I mean, but again, he was going to run into that Irish glass ceiling in the North too. So you wonder how that might have gone. There's something to say. He might have got Corps Command.
Yeah,
it's very, very possible. You never know. You know, I mean, the what if thing is always a lot of fun to talk about. We talk a lot about Phil Kearny. We talk about the Second Corps, post Chancellorsville, but But that's why you talk about it. That's why you sit at the bar, drink beers, and talk to these people.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the Kearney one was good because I think we had him as leading the Army of the Potomac at some point.
Well, I mean, if he survived, he kept going. I mean, I think we talked before that if he survives, I think he probably gets that corps command over Hancock. MJ jumped off, so we could say this. He probably would have gotten the second corps. If not, then he would have got the fifth corps probably.
Yeah.
Instead of psych. So it's who knows, but that's why it's fun to talk about the stuff. Because
it is, because you kind of have to look at what you've learned and all that, and like how it plays in. And I say Clayburn would have been in the Western Theater because he's living in Cincinnati, which is the same city that Lytle's in, and Lytle fights in the Western Theater. So
it's possible, but I mean, there were obviously a lot of Ohio guys in the East too.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, I get that. I was just going by the whole like, okay, Lytle's in Cincinnati, so probably Clayburn they might have even signed up in the same,
No, not to say you're wrong. I'd say your guess is as good as anybody else's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe he would have been. What if Clayburn was at Gettysburg? He would have fought against Stonewall.
But could you imagine the two, Stonewall and Clayburn, in the same
Stonewall would have taken that hill. He would have taken that hill.
Yeah, bullshit, he would have. I hate that. That is the worst. What if Stonewall was at Gettysburg?
Well, I told you, a friend of mine does tours over there. He gets that question a lot, and he goes, Stonewall was at Gettysburg. He goes, what are you talking about? He points to one of those stone walls. He goes, he's right there. Yeah. That's pretty good. Good sense of humor.
I was at Chickamauga with a friend of mine one time, and they were like, what if Stonewall was at Gettysburg? And I just said, I'm like, we don't talk about that. We don't do that. We don't play that what if game.
Well, there are certain things that are realistic. There's some things that are not realistic, but in any case, we should get ready to jump up here pretty soon. It's almost noontime already, so this one fast.
Mm-hmm. No, this was great as always. We'll probably be back around sometime next weekend. We do have some stuff going on, so I have to work. Yeah, we're going to North End.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So definitely, Pete Carmichael's book. Yeah. Check it out. If you haven't listened to the episode, definitely listen to it, because he's a type of guy. He's very laid back. He's a fun listen. He's a good dude too.
And also anybody going to Civil War Institute, CWI, I believe it's June 9th to 14th. Pete talks about it at the end of the episode, and they have, like I said, they have scholars, they have public historians, they cover Eastern Theater, Western Theater. They're talking about Army of Tennessee this year for one of the things. I know Craig Simmons is one of the speakers there too.
And don't forget, you get Civil War Breakfast Club discounts.
Yep, there is the Civil War Breakfast Club. The discount code is PAR. So I'll put that in the chat again.
And so we'll all be down in Gettysburg for the anniversary. So we'll look forward to that. And and so I think Peter will be probably hitting us with full score again, realistically.
That's where we met him. We were talking about that. It was so cool. We just randomly ran into him we went over to say hi to him, and we started talking, and he was like, well, I can be a guest if you want. We're like, okay.
Yes, Peter Carmichael, we'll have you on to talk about our stupid little thing we do. But he's good because he's right up our alley, because he's more interested in the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and the O's, as they say. Yeah. He's more interested in the grassroots stuff, which is exactly our stuff.
And I really like to, just before I jump off, I really like to that he talked about, because he's obviously a professor at Gettysburg College, and he said there are so many young people getting into the Civil War now, and that is a huge misconception that young people aren't getting in the Civil War. But he said, they're there and they love it, because he took his students out. Can't remember the guy's name, with a photographer, and they were studying the pictures. Remember, he told the story about how the girl was like, "Oh my God, that guy's got his pants down in the picture."
Yeah. Well,
and it led to Pete telling them that he probably was wounded.
Oh, the story. If you look at some of the Gardner pictures or the Brady pictures, you see the Confederates and their shirts are all ripped up, like someone rifled the bodies. And in most cases, it was the soldiers themselves before they died, trying to find the wound and try to fix. And you see a lot of that. But in this case, it was one of the Rosewood stories. Probably the Rosewoods clown got this guy. But he's lying there in his pants, even his underwear is down. So he's out there. And one of his students noticed it. And so he told that story. He goes, I rolled my eyes, because of course this person's going to notice this guy's got no pants on. But then he got to tell that story, but it's fascinating to hear some of the stories, hear him talk about this stuff.
Yeah, and it was nice to hear him say that young people are getting involved in the Civil War and all that too. So he's very great. He's a great person. Definitely check out his book, War for the Common Soldier. Very, very good.
Yeah, no question, no question.
And David mentioned that War for the Common Soldier is available for free on Audible if your thing is audiobooks.
Yeah, I mean it's a great book. It basically it's just it doesn't every chapter is a different soldier story. The John and Charlie Futch letters are one of the chapters, which is what was the subject of the episode we did. But they're all great because they all tell human stories. And check out again privatevoices.com.
Yeah.
I promise it's not porn.
Make sure you put in Civil War.
But if you pull it up, it'll give you a database of a whole bunch of original soldier letters that are fascinating to read. Some of them are very mundane, but they're cool. There are some of them that have a little more substantial to them, but you could sit there. It's one of those sites you can go on all day and just read all day and read these letters. And so check them out. All right, so off we go. So Spotsylvania next for us. We'll be doing that.
And then Pickett's
Mill. And then we got the book club coming up here pretty soon, right?
Yeah, our next book club meeting is going to be when we have to confirm the date with the author, but we are going to be talking Maine at Gettysburg with Tom Huntington. We decided to do a book for Gettysburg as well, because it's the 160th, and that's why we did Grierson's Raid, because Gettysburg or Vicksburg 160th. So we
try to be fair to them all. We like all the battles.
Yeah,
and try to be fair.
Simmons is going to be in September. Just in time for the anniversary of Chickamauga and all that. And then our last book club is going to be Lisa Samia with her new book, Nameless and Faceless Women, or not Nameless and Faceless of the Civil War. I think it's called Gettysburg, Manassas and Beyond.
If you read the book on Tom Huntington, you may find out there are more than one person besides the guy with the mustache and the round top.
Yeah.
You learn about guys like Charles Tilden.
Yeah.
Francis McGilvery. Right, Greeley Stevens, Oliver Otis Howard. Oh my God, there's a cornucopia of Mainers in this book, but it's really, really good. It's but definitely check the book out, and you'll definitely enjoy that. And so 160th anniversary year, it's all starting. So get out to the battlefields, get out there and do it. Go see the stuff while you can.
Yep, and join us tonight on Unfiltered Historian. So that's run by Tyler, and I think Darren's.
That's right.
UK Darren is involved with it too. But if you just look up Unfiltered Historian on Facebook, you'll find his page. Give him a like. He's like us, very down to earth, talking about the stories. So we're going to be on with him tonight at 8:00 Eastern time. So we are looking forward to that.
And since we're talking what our friends are doing, because that's awesome. We have awesome friends who do a lot of Civil War cool stuff. The great Lisa Samia's got a bunch of stuff going on. Lisa, right? We got some stuff, so go on her page and keep up with her. It's tough to keep track. She's like Beyonce now. She's got so many things she's been doing, But go on her page. We try to keep track of everything she does. She's going to Tudor Hall pretty soon to talk about the booth stuff. And she's got a whole bunch of stuff for anybody who's went down to Richmond to see her. She's awesome. So there's a lot of stuff. So make sure you follow her, get on her schedule, go see her. She'll be glad to see you.
Yeah, she's an amazing speaker. Poetry is beautiful too. I love it.
It is. Awesome. It is. No question about that. All right. So off we go. So we have a great rest of the weekend. Hopefully it's warmer than here. Sucks here. Stupid Bruins. I'm so pissed about the Bruins. They better freaking win tomorrow.
If the Leafs lose, I will be so happy.
If the Bruins lose tomorrow, I'm going to freak out. Fair warning. Okay. I'm going to have that leave. I'm going to have that John Wayne Gacy look in my eye if they lose that game tomorrow.
Are you going to look like what's his face from the movie Gettysburg that I always post his picture sometimes? Ellis Spear. The Ellis.
Oh yeah.
The disgruntled temp.
Yeah, no question. We'll see. Well, it's all good. It's all fun and games. So definitely check out Lisa's stuff. Check us out tonight on Unfiltered Historian at 8 p.m. Go on his site, Tyler and the boys. They do a lot of fun. We'll be just doing this, hanging out, talking Civil War stuff. If you got nothing else to do, feel free to jump on. And away we go.
Yeah.
Funko Mary, who facial expression looks like you about 9:00 last night. Remember correctly? Kind of staring off into space with dilated eyes, but off we go.
Lisa just says May 9th Civil War Roundtable in Southern Maryland. So that's one of her events. Lisa, send us the details for that, and
we'll promote it.
Yeah,
but I'm telling you, she's like the Beyonce of the Civil War. She's gonna have an entourage following her around.
Yeah,
I guess that would make Jimmy's Jay-Z then, right?
I'm just picturing that now.
Oh, can you imagine? He can walk you with that big jacket. It's too funny. All right, guys.
If he's watching this, he's laughing. Right
I'm sure he is.
She's glaring at you.
Oh, she's give me one of these. But in any case, all right, guys, have a great rest of the weekend. Hopefully, stay safe, stay warm, and to quote Jerry Springer, who just died, right? Be good to one another.
Yeah. Yeah. So we will hopefully be back with you guys probably next Saturday at the same time.